Hey guys, welcome back to the Joe Silverback Show. I just finished part 1, 2, and 3 on leadership. If you haven't seen it, definitely look at that. And as I, make my videos and then I get off of talking, I realize that oftentimes I'm trying to dance on eggshells and pussyfoot around about certain things that are very, very serious. And one of the things that is very, very serious to me that I can't stand that I pussyfoot around is feminism and what feminism has done to destroy man's natural role as a leader. And as I step up into that position more and more, I realize that, and when I talk about feminism, I'm talking about females. I'm talking about an idea, an ideology, a concept that has nothing to do with women. It has to do with destroying men. So please, when I talk about feminism, do not put your hair up and think that you have to defend it if you're a woman. Men are just as mesmerized and tranquilized and hypnotized by feminism as women are, and it is to men that I want to wake up. And one of the ways that we need to wake up is to be honest and not dance around, on eggshells. And I get people asking me about, how I raised my children and what I did to try to counterpose that. And I did a lot. But 3 decades later, looking back on what I did, all that my mentor taught me, all that my 3 decades of sitting at the seashore taught me, and contemplating how is it done in nature, what is the role of the man, what is the role of the woman, what's the natural roles of each one of us. The values of nature around survival and male leadership are what's missing in our pacified, civilized world. Because of men, we have created a safety net in certain cultures where we're not faced with brutal realities. I talk about nature, I talk about primitive nature, I talk about primitive biology. Dennis Prager, Jordan Peterson, somebody else might be talking about evil in the world and inherent evil in mankind. The reason why deep thinkers talk about these is because of the study of history and the awareness that the way of the peaceful warrior and the way of the Zen Buddhist and the way of the pacifist is a very pleasant pastime when you've made it personally, individually, or collectively in society, where you can actually go down to the seashore and sit without the thought of anybody attacking you. It doesn't jive like 50 years ago when my mentor was down in Mexico studying medicinal plants. Coastally, he was near a jungle, and while he went off into the jungle to do some studies, some bandits came and clubbed his wife on the head and stole their satchels. Their satchels that they stole, one of them happened to be his 20 years of research on medicinal plants around the world. But that's not my point. My point was that there's evil in the world, there's bad people in the world, there's shit that happens, and we have to be prepared. And if we pussyfoot around, we're not prepared. And if we pussyfoot around with raising our children to be some feminized, amorphous fuzzy that's, not a man, not a woman, somewhere in between, or doesn't know what it means to be a man, or doesn't even want to look at what it means to be masculine as a male, as the primary values of being a man, because for some reason now even the identification of a man with masculinity or a woman with femininity is somehow against the tribal values. So I'm not pussyfooting around here. I'm a soft male. I've been softened by feminism, and I must admit it. Okay, now I'm awake. So My mentor told me when I was getting married and having children that I needed to draw a line in the sand. And his line in the sand meant that nobody, not my mother, not my grandmother, not my sisters, not anybody in my family could cross over and interfere with the sanctity and the sacredness of my primary alpha female, my only female. And I had to protect that line. Now, that line extended not just to my family. My wife and I ended up making a line whereby anybody in the community that didn't want to support what it was that we believed in, what we valued, what we wanted for our tribe, for our children, for ourselves, couldn't cross over either. And we were going to protect that. And we did protect that. And that is the silverback principle. That is the pounding on the chest, don't cross the line. So with all of this in-group social bonding, I want to get my, child into Harvard, so I'm going to, kiss ass with, you and you and you and you and you, people I wouldn't even dream of having over for dinner, but I'm going to dream of having you over under the influence of some alcohol, so that hopefully social networking can happen and la-di-da-di-da-di-da. Okay, I'm not here for those kind of people. I am what you call a rugged individualist, and I am here for the protection of your child and your husband or your wife in the sanctity of the pair bond that is very, very primal. Secondly, I'm here to tell you, unless you have a burning passion for doing the right thing, you really don't want to be watching this show. And unless you have a burning passion for turning out men who are not afraid to step up and protect and defend women, children, and the elderly, turning out women who are not afraid of serving their men and serving their children and serving their family and putting their children and family above themselves, unless you are not willing to put your life on the line for what you believe in, you really shouldn't be listening to this program. So what the line meant is this, and I'm going to say it to you, mamsy-pamsy men and women out there who are afraid of taking charge of your own child. Study primitive culture, study primate biology, study the question, how is it done in nature, and ask yourself this question: when should my child be heard and seen? If that makes you cry that I say that, you really, really, really do not belong on this program. You really don't have a connection with me, with what I'm trying to instruct. A child learns by looking up to the mother and the father. A child bonds with the mother, pair bonds, falls in love. Mother is the child's first love. The father is the child's first hero. Does it mean that the mother's not the hero? No. My mother was my greatest hero, and I hope that I earn her respect over time. But there's a different kind of hero worship that goes on toward the mother than toward the father. Toward the mother, it's about selflessness and selfless love. Toward the father, it's about being courageous and fearless in the face of danger. In order to give an example, just think that you're out in the middle of the wilderness and your son, if he makes a sound, may bring danger to the whole group. Think along those lines. That means from the day that that child is born, it is learning a lesson to keep quiet, keep still, and follow the signals of the alpha male of the group, who's to protect and provide for him. And part of protecting and providing means to say, hey, keep your big mouth shut or you'll get us all killed. And that's part of group think. Today, This idea, this obsession of the child as some great, 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 incredible instructor of all of us adults is insane. Now, I've made videos on consciousness and I've made videos on family, bringing consciousness into the family, but I, for the life of me, don't want to mislead anybody into thinking that consciousness is something that you can have a child equate with yours until that child reaches some level of passing of rights of adulthood. Up until that time, and even through that time, through the entire time that you exist with that child should be upwardly looking at you. And if they aren't, it's because you haven't been man enough, you haven't been strong enough, you haven't been leader enough to make your woman and your child understand that principle. Now, maybe it's the woman who holds on to this principle and she needs to help her man step up to the plate and create that so that the child will have an understanding that you are God. That's an intentional pause. If that brought you fear and loathing and ready to scream, I'll say it again. Your child has to see that you are God. And if the child doesn't see that you are God, you are not doing your job well enough. If your child is not seeing that you are God, you're not doing your job well enough. You're trying to be friends with your child. Friendship with the children does not exist. It does not work. When your children get older and they go off on their own, there's only one thing that they're going to be interested in you for until they have made it on their own, and that's your money. That's how can you help them get to where they want. You need to think about that now. Your primary job is to get that child to obey and to think that you are God and to think and understand that he or she is following God. No matter how many mistakes God makes, and we all know God makes mistakes because we spend a lot of our lives criticizing religion for all the mistakes that gods have made and men have made in the name of gods. So let's just accept that. No matter who your God is, no matter who the chain of command is, no matter who the leader at the top is, there will be mistakes that are made. That's not the point. The point is a child has to understand its place in the pecking order of things. If it doesn't, it's going to have an illusion that millions and millions of Americans and millions of children around the world today are suffering from, wherever wealth has been created and wherever this absent-mindedness about leisure, intellectual life and leisure have fallen prey to keep parents from doing what they're supposed to do, which is to get their children to obey the adults and to follow you like you are God. Now, it would be, so I people ask me questions all the time about how was your child when you brought him up? I didn't bring my children to a restaurant when he was an infant and he didn't have control over his emotions. I didn't put myself in a situation where I said the world has to stop so I can have my child have entertainment at 2, 3, 4, 5 years old when he doesn't know how to control himself. I made my child be quiet and follow me like I was God. Secondly, I home educated my children so that they could still hold on to those principles. Doesn't mean that it worked. I live in a society where very few people respect that principle, where people will come and make your children more important than you. Even police officers would stop and talk to my children without even acknowledging me. Talking about police officers on the beach who were cruising that my children got to know. Lifeguards, police officers wouldn't even acknowledge my wife or me sometimes, where I would have to say, excuse me, you're not going to be having a conversation with my child if you're not going to be acknowledging their parent, because their parent is God and you can't break that. You can't let that be broken. And that's where the line in the sand has to be drawn. Okay, more on this later. Just think about a couple things right now. My child is here to learn to obey. My child is here to see that I am God. If you can get those two things right, you may have a chance. Namaste.